Captain Dongmin Lee stood on the bridge of his ship, the peaceful dawn. Through the large windows he could see the stars scattered like tiny diamonds across the black sky. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but the sight still made him feel small and amazed. Today was supposed to be another quiet day. For 3,000 years, humans had lived in peace across the galaxy. Wars were something people only read about in old history books. The last real fight between humans had happened so long ago that most people thought it was just a story. "Captain, we're getting close to the survey area," said his pilot, So-Min Jung. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that always seemed curious about what they might find next. "Good, let's see what's out here," Dongmin said. He was 42 and had never seen anything more dangerous than a broken mining robot. That was normal. Space exploration was safe now. The most exciting thing that usually happened was finding a new type of rock, or maybe some old ruins from a dead civilization. The Peaceful Dawn was not a warship. It had tools for digging, machines for studying planets, and comfortable rooms for the crew. It had no weapons because no one needed weapons anymore. The idea seemed silly, like bringing a sword to cut vegetables. Back on Earth, Admiral Hyan-Woo Park was sitting in his office reading reports about mining operations and trade routes. He was 58 years old and had been in charge of the Terran Defense Fleet for 20 years. But there was nothing to defend against. His job was mostly making sure supply ships got where they needed to go and helping when asteroids drifted too close to colonies. The Defense Fleet had ships, but they were more like flying rescue vehicles. They had strong hulls to push asteroids away from planets and good medical bays to help injured miners. The biggest gun on any ship was designed to break apart space rocks, not fight enemies. Hyan-Woo often wondered what his job would have been like in the old days, when humans actually fought wars. But those thoughts never lasted long. Peace was better. Everyone knew that. On the research station orbiting Mars, Dr. Soon-Ja Kim was studying samples from a newly discovered planet. She was 39 and had spent her whole career looking at alien life forms. Most of them were simple, tiny creatures that lived in rocks or strange plants that grew in poisonous soil. She had never found anything that could think or talk. The galaxy seemed empty of intelligent life except for humans. In 3,000 years of exploration, they had found millions of planets but no other thinking beings. Some scientists thought humans might be alone. Others believed they just hadn't looked far enough yet. Soon-Ja hoped they would find someone else someday. It would be exciting to meet another intelligent species and learn about their culture. She imagined peaceful meetings, sharing knowledge, maybe even becoming friends. In the government building on Earth, Minister Yoon-Hai Choi was reviewing trade agreements between different human colonies. She was 45 and had worked in politics her whole life. Her job was to make sure all the human worlds got along well with each other. It was an easy job. Humans had learned how to solve problems without fighting. When colonies disagreed about something, they talked it out. They used computer programs to find solutions that made everyone happy. Violence was something that happened in old movies, not in real life. The Terran Harmony Accord had made sure of that. It was a set of rules and ideas that all human worlds followed. The main idea was simple. There was always a better way to solve problems than hurting people. Back on the Peaceful Dawn, something strange appeared on the scanner screens. "Captain, you need to see this," called engineer Tae-hyun. Oh, from his station. He was 33 and usually calm, but now his voice sounded worried. Dongmin walked over to look at the screen. What he saw made no sense. There were huge structures floating in space where yesterday there had been nothing. They were bigger than cities, dark and angular, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light. "How long have those been there?" Dongmin asked. "That's just it, sir. They weren't there yesterday. I checked our scans from 24 hours ago. This area was completely empty." Suman turned from her pilot station. "That's impossible. Nothing that big can just appear overnight." But the evidence was right there on the screen. Dozens of massive objects, each one the size of a small moon, had somehow appeared in what used to be empty space. "Are they ships?" Dongmin asked. "I don't know, sir. They're not like anything in our databases. The materials, the design, even the way they're arranged, none of it matches human technology." Dongmin felt something he had never experienced before. It was like fear, but different, heavier. Send a message to Earth immediately, full priority, and start recording everything. While Tae-hyun worked on the message, Dongmin stared at the alien structures. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like storms made of metal and shadow. After 3,000 years of peace and loneliness in the galaxy, humans were no longer alone. On Earth, the message reached Admiral Hyan-Woo first. He read it 3 times before he believed what it said. Then he called Minister Yunhei immediately. "We have a problem," he told her when she answered. "What kind of problem?" "The kind we haven't had for 3,000 years. We've found aliens. Or maybe they found us." Minister Yunhei was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are they hostile?" "We don't know yet, but they appeared suddenly without warning right at the edge of our space. That doesn't seem like a friendly way to introduce yourself." Within hours, the news had spread to every human world. For the first time in 3 millennia, humanity faced something unknown and potentially dangerous. The reaction was mostly confusion. People simply didn't know how to think about threats anymore. Dr. Soonja Kim was called to Earth to help study the data from Dongmin's ship. When she saw the images of the alien structures, she felt both excited and afraid. This was what she had dreamed of, contact with another intelligent species. But something about these aliens felt wrong. "They've been watching us," she told the emergency council that had been formed to deal with the situation. "Look at how perfectly positioned they are. These aren't random arrivals. They chose this location specifically." "Watching us for how long?" asked Hyun-Woo. "Could be decades. Could be centuries. We have no way to know." The peaceful galaxy humans had known for 3,000 years suddenly felt very small and very dangerous, and somewhere in the alien structures, unknown minds were making plans that would change everything. The first attack came at dawn on New Shanghai, a mining colony at the edge of human space. The Vextar weapons didn't explode like bombs or burn like lasers. Instead, they simply erased everything they touched, leaving behind empty spaces where buildings and people used to be. Captain Dongmin Lee watched it happen from his ship, helpless to intervene. The peaceful dawn had no weapons that could damage the massive alien vessel that hung over the colony like a dark moon. 2 million people, whispered pilot Sumin Jang as they watched the attack. "They're just gone." The news reached Earth within hours. For the first time in 3,000 years, humans had been killed in warfare. The reaction was unlike anything in recorded history. People didn't just feel sad or angry. They felt something deeper, something that seemed to come from their bones. Dr. Soonja Kim was in her laboratory when the news arrived. She had been working on analyzing Vextar technology, but suddenly she found herself thinking about weapons instead. Not just any weapons, specific designs that seemed to appear in her mind without her trying to remember them. "That's strange," she muttered, sketching diagrams that felt familiar even though she had never seen them before. Similar things were happening across human space. On Earth, archivist Byung-ho Kang was deep in the restricted sections of the historical database when he discovered files that shouldn't exist. They were sealed records from before the Great Purging, hidden so well that the Purge hadn't found them. "My God," he breathed as he read about humanity's ancient wars. "We weren't just violent. We were terrifyingly good at it." The files described weapons that could crack planets, strategies that turned entire star systems into battlefields, and tactics so ruthless that they made the Vextar's attack look gentle by comparison. Dr. Hyejin Park was a geneticist who had spent her career studying human evolution. When the colony was destroyed, she felt compelled to run tests on her own DNA. What she found shocked her. "The modifications aren't complete," she told her research team. "We thought the Great Purging had removed humanity's violent instincts entirely, but it only suppressed them. The genetic patterns are still there, just sleeping." Elder Kyung-Suk Lim was 94 years old and one of the last humans alive whose genetics hadn't been modified during the Great Purging. She lived quietly on a small farm on Earth, mostly forgotten by the modern world. When news of the attack reached her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Rage. Pure, focused, deadly rage. "They have no idea what they've awakened," she said to herself, her hands moving to weapons that weren't there. Muscle memory from a time when humans knew how to kill. Admiral Hyan-Woo Park was in the Fleet Command Center when the reports started coming in. Not reports of damage or casualties, but reports of change. Human behavior was shifting across the galaxy in ways that made no scientific sense. "Sir, we're getting strange communications from our ships," reported Commander Yeon Ho Shin. "Crew members are requesting modifications to their vessels. They want to add weapons." "What kind of weapons?" "That's just it, sir. They're describing designs that don't exist in our databases, but the technical specifications are perfect. It's like they're remembering blueprints from somewhere. General Jin A. Nam had been studying military history for days, trying to understand warfare enough to help defend humanity. But something had changed after the colony attack. The old texts suddenly made sense to her in a way they hadn't before. Battle tactics that had seemed confusing now felt obvious, natural, almost instinctive. "Bring me all the personnel files for our defense fleet," she ordered her aide. "I need to know which crew members might have unmodified genetic lines." Scholar Mi Young Seo made the most disturbing discovery of all. Hidden in the deepest archives, she found the real reason for the Great Purging. Humanity hadn't just been violent before 2156. They had been the most successful warrior species in the galaxy. They had conquered and destroyed so thoroughly that they had terrified themselves into changing their own nature. "We didn't lose the war song," she reported to the emergency council. "We buried it because it was too powerful, too dangerous, even to ourselves." Dr. Soonja Kim's research had taken a dark turn. Instead of studying alien biology, she found herself designing biological weapons that could target specific genetic markers. The knowledge seemed to flow from somewhere deep in her mind, as if it had always been there waiting for the right moment to emerge. Meanwhile, across human space, ordinary people were experiencing strange dreams. Farmers dreamed of battlefield strategies. Teachers dreamed of weapon designs. Children drew pictures of space battles with tactics that would have impressed ancient military commanders. Engineer Tai Hyun, still aboard the Peaceful Dawn, had begun modifying the ship's mining equipment without orders from Captain Dong Min. When asked why, he couldn't give a clear answer. "It just feels right," he said, showing Dong Min blueprints for converting their mineral extraction tools into something that looked suspiciously like a weapon. Like this is what they were always meant to be. The changes weren't just individual. Entire populations were beginning to organize themselves in ways that resembled military structures, even though none of them had conscious knowledge of such things. It was as if 3,000 years of peaceful civilization were being overwritten by something much older and far more dangerous. Dr. Hai Jin Park's genetic research revealed the scope of what was happening. "It's not just instincts returning," she explained to the council. "The attack triggered some kind of genetic response. Dormant DNA sequences are activating across the entire human population." "What do these sequences do?" asked Minister Yunhei. "They contain information. Military knowledge, weapon designs, battle tactics. It's all coded into our genes, passed down from our ancestors who lived before the Great Purging." Elder Kyung-suk Lim had become the center of scientific attention when researchers discovered her unmodified genetics. Unlike other humans, she didn't need to remember the old ways. She had never forgotten them. "Your ancestors were wise to suppress the war song," she told the emergency council when they brought her to Earth, but they were also naive to think it could be completely erased. "Violence isn't just learned behavior for humans. It's part of our survival code. Can you teach us?" asked Admiral Hyun-woo. The old woman smiled, and for a moment her gentle features looked predatory. "Teach you? Child, you don't need to be taught. You just need to remember." As the Vextar continued their systematic destruction of outer colonies, humanity was undergoing a transformation that would have horrified their peaceful ancestors. The genetic modifications that had created 3,000 years of peace were breaking down, revealing the warrior species that lay beneath. But something else was happening too. The returning knowledge wasn't just about individual violence or simple warfare. The genetic memories contained strategies and technologies that were far more sophisticated than anything the Vextar had shown. Captain Dong Min, Lee found himself understanding space combat tactics he had never learned, while his crew modified their exploration vessel into something that looked increasingly like a warship. But not just any warship, a design that seemed impossibly advanced, as if humanity's ancient military technology had been far beyond what their current civilization could achieve. "We're not just remembering how to fight," Dr. Soonja Kim realized as she studied the genetic data. "We're remembering how to win, against enemies much more powerful than the Vextar. The aliens who had demanded humanity's war song were about to discover why an ancient human civilization had been so afraid of its own capacity for violence that it had chosen to bury it completely. The Vextar had wanted to awaken humanity's warrior nature, and they were going to get exactly what they asked for. But they might not survive the experience. The message came without warning. Every screen on every human world lit up at the same moment. Television broadcasts stopped. Computer systems froze. Even the simple displays on kitchen appliances showed the same thing: an alien face looking directly at whoever was watching. The being that appeared was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and completely black like holes in space. When it spoke, the words came in perfect human language, but the voice sounded like metal grinding against stone. "We are the Vextar," it said. "For cycles beyond your counting, we have observed your species. You are broken." Ambassador Seong-ho Yoon was in his office on Earth when the broadcast began. He was 61 years old and had spent 40 years helping human colonies solve their disagreements peacefully. He had never dealt with anything like this. "Every intelligent species in this galaxy possesses the war song," the alien continued. "It is the music of survival, the rhythm of strength, the melody that proves a civilization worthy of existence. You have lost yours." On the research station near Mars, Dr. Soonja Kim watched the broadcast with growing horror. She had imagined first contact as an exchange of knowledge and friendship. This felt more like a judgment. "We give you one cycle of your star to produce the war song," the Vextar said. "Show us your capacity for strategic violence. Demonstrate your warrior nature. If you cannot, we will awaken it ourselves through the destruction of your worlds." The alien's face disappeared, leaving billions of humans staring at blank screens and trying to understand what had just happened. Within minutes, emergency meetings were called on every major human world. Ambassador Seong-ho Yoon found himself appointed as humanity's chief negotiator, even though he had no idea how to negotiate with beings who demanded war. "What exactly is a war song?" asked Minister Yoon Hai Choi during the emergency council meeting. "We're not sure," admitted Dr. Soonja Kim. "But based on their message, it seems to be some kind of natural ability for organized violence that they believe all intelligent species should have." Admiral Hyun-woo Park looked uncomfortable. "The problem is we don't have that anymore. We haven't fought a real war in 3,000 years. Our military exists to help with disasters and exploration, not to fight battles." General Jin A-nam had been pulled out of retirement for this crisis. She was 72 years old and had studied military history as a hobby, never thinking she would need to use that knowledge. She was the closest thing humanity had to a war expert, and even she had never seen actual combat. "I've been reading the old records," she said. "Before the Harmony Accord, humans were apparently very good at warfare. But that was a long time ago. Those skills, those instincts, they're gone now." Scholar Mi-young Seo was tasked with searching through humanity's historical archives, looking for anything that might help them understand what the Vextar wanted. She was 35 and had always been fascinated by the violent period of human history that ended 3,000 years ago. "The Great Purging of 2156, she explained to the council. "That's when humanity decided to end war forever. They didn't just stop fighting. They actively removed the desire to fight from human society. They changed laws, education, even the way people thought about conflict." "But we still have the capacity for violence, don't we?" asked Ambassador Seong-ho. "Individual violence, yes. But strategic warfare? Organized military thinking? I'm not sure. We've spent 3,000 years training ourselves not to think that way." Meanwhile, Captain Dongmin Lee and his crew on the Peaceful Dawn were still watching the alien structures. The massive objects had begun to move, arranging themselves in patterns that looked almost like battle formations, though none of the humans recognized them as such. "They're getting ready for something," reported Engineer Tae-hyun No. "Energy readings are increasing across all the structures." "Any response to our communication attempts?" asked Dongmin. "Nothing, sir. They're ignoring us completely." Back on Earth, the Terran Defense Fleet was trying to prepare for something they didn't understand. Admiral Hyun-woo Park stood in the Fleet Command Center, looking at displays showing their ships. They had mining lasers, construction equipment, and rescue gear. Against an enemy that demanded war, they might as well have been carrying kitchen knives. "How many combat-capable vessels do we have?" he asked his staff. "That depends on how you define combat-capable." "Sir," replied Commander Yeon-ho Shin, "we have ships that could ram into things, and mining equipment that could probably damage other vessels. But actual weapons designed for fighting, None. What about our manufacturing capacity? How quickly could we build real warships? We'd have to design them first, sir. And we don't know how to do that anymore. It was a strange problem. Humanity had become so peaceful that they had forgotten how to make tools for war. Their engineers could build anything. Cities that floated in gas-giant atmospheres. Machines that could reshape entire planets. But weapons for killing were outside their knowledge. Dr. Soonja. Kim was working with a team of scientists to analyze every piece of data they had about the Vextar. The results were troubling. Their technology is far beyond ours, she reported to the council. The materials they use, the energy levels they can generate, we're not even close to matching them. Could we negotiate? Asked Ambassador Seong-ho. They don't seem interested in talking. Their message was pretty clear. Show them the war song or face destruction. Scholar Mi Young-seo had made a disturbing discovery in the historical archives. I found something, she announced to the emergency council. Records from the time just before the Great Purging. Apparently, humanity was incredibly violent back then. Not just wars between nations, but something called total warfare, the complete destruction of enemy populations and resources. That's terrible, said Minister Yoon-hae. Yes, but it might be what the Vextar are looking for. They said every intelligent species has the war song. Maybe they expect us to be capable of that level of violence. General Jin-ae Nam shook her head. Even if we wanted to fight like that, we wouldn't know how. Those instincts were bred out of us generations ago. As the days passed, human colonies began evacuating their outer settlements. Without any way to defend themselves, people moved closer to Earth and the other core worlds. The Terran Defense Fleet spread out as much as possible, but their ships looked pitiful compared to the massive alien structures. Captain Dongmin Lee received new orders to fall back toward human space. But he and his crew continued to monitor the aliens. What they saw was not encouraging. More structures are appearing, reported pilot Su Minjiang. Dozens of them, all around the edge of human territory. It's like they're surrounding us, added Taehyun No. The Vextar were clearly preparing for something, and humanity had no idea how to respond. For 3,000 years they had lived without enemies, without the need to fight, without the ability to make war. Now they faced beings who seemed to believe that the capacity for violence was the most important quality an intelligent species could have. Ambassador Seong-ho. Yoon tried once more to establish communication with the aliens, sending messages explaining humanity's peaceful nature and asking for dialogue. The response came 12 hours before the deadline the Vextar had given. Another broadcast appeared on every screen in human space. The same alien face, the same grinding voice. Your peaceful nature is evidence of your failure as a species, it said. Tomorrow we begin the awakening. Perhaps the threat of extinction will remind you of what you have forgotten. The message ended, leaving humanity with less than 1 day to solve a problem that seemed impossible. They needed to find a war song they had deliberately destroyed 3,000 years ago, or watch their civilization face annihilation at the hands of aliens who saw peace as weakness. The second Vextar attack on the mining world of Haven's Rest changed everything. As news of the massacre spread across human space, something fundamental shifted in the collective human mind. What had been individual awakenings became a species-wide transformation. General Jin-ae Nam stood in the war room that had been hastily constructed in the depths of Earth's government complex. Maps of the galaxy covered the walls, marked with red symbols showing Vextar positions and black marks where human colonies had been destroyed. But what amazed her wasn't the tactical situation. It was how naturally she understood it all. We need to hit their supply lines, she said, pointing to a cluster of alien structures near the galactic rim. The words came easily, as if she had been planning battles her entire life instead of studying ancient history as a hobby. Admiral Hyun-woo Park nodded, following her reasoning without effort. A week ago, he had been a glorified traffic controller for mining ships. Now he found himself thinking about fleet movements and strategic positioning, with the instinct of a born warrior. What about their command structure? He asked. If we can identify their leadership vessels. There, General Jin-ae pointed to the largest alien structure. That one has been coordinating the attacks. Take it out and the others should lose cohesion. Across human space, similar conversations were happening on every world. Peaceful colonists were organizing themselves into military units. Scientists were designing weapons with efficiency that terrified them. Artists were creating propaganda that could drive enemies to despair just by looking at it. On the research station near Mars, Dr. Soonja Kim had abandoned her xenobiology work entirely. Instead, she was developing something she called adaptive warfare, protocols, strategies that could evolve and change faster than an enemy could respond to them. It's not enough to be stronger, she explained to her research team. We need to be unpredictable. Every time they adapt to our tactics, we need to have already moved on to something else. Her team nodded as if this made perfect sense, even though a month ago none of them would have understood military strategy at all. Engineer Tae-hyun had completed his modifications to the Peaceful Dawn. The exploration vessel now bristled with weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum of advanced warfare. But more importantly, he had figured out how to make them work using principles that shouldn't have been possible with current human technology. Captain, you need to see this, he called to Dongmin Lee. Dongmin looked at the weapon readouts and felt a mixture of pride and horror. The mining lasers had been converted into something called matter disruptors, devices that could break apart the molecular bonds in any target. The cargo bays now held swarms of small drones that could think for themselves and coordinate attacks. How do you know how to build this stuff? Dongmin asked. I don't know, Tae-hyun replied honestly, but every time I need to solve a technical problem, the solution just appears in my head. It's like someone else's knowledge, but it feels like mine. Pilot Soo-min Jang had been practicing with the ship's new combat systems. She had never flown in battle before, never even seen combat maneuvers except in old historical videos. But when she sat in the pilot's chair now, her hands moved across the controls with deadly precision. I can see how to fight them, she told Dongmin. Not just their current positions, but where they're going to be. It's like their tactics are predictable once you know how to look. Similar awakenings were happening across the human fleet. Cargo haulers were being converted into heavy assault vessels. Passenger ships became carriers for fighter squadrons that didn't exist a week ago. Mining platforms turned into mobile fortresses. But the most dramatic change was in the people themselves. Strategist Woo Jin-yu had been a trade negotiator before the war began. His job was to help colonies agree on shipping schedules and resource allocation. Now he was designing battle plans that took into account not just ship movements and weapon ranges, but psychology, economics, and long-term strategic goals that stretched across decades. The Vextar think in terms of direct confrontation, he explained to Admiral Hyun-woo during a fleet briefing. They attack, you defend. They advance, you retreat. But that's not how humans really fight. What do you mean? We turn our enemies' strengths against them. We make them win battles in ways that help us win the war. We make victory so expensive that defeat becomes attractive. The Admiral stared at him. Where did you learn that? I didn't learn it. I remembered it. Dr. Hyejin Park's genetic research had revealed the full scope of what was happening. The dormant DNA sequences weren't just activating randomly. They were responding to specific triggers and coordinating with each other across the entire human population. It's like a biological internet, she explained to the Emergency Council. Each person is accessing different parts of humanity's military knowledge, but they're all connected. A strategist on Earth can instinctively coordinate with a pilot near Jupiter, even though they've never met. That's impossible, said Minister Yoon-hae. A month ago, I would have agreed with you, but we're seeing it happen. Humans are sharing tactical knowledge in real time across interstellar distances without using any communication technology. The Vextar had noticed the change too. Their attacks became more cautious, more probing. They were clearly confused by humanity's rapid transformation from helpless prey to dangerous opponent. Captain Dongmin Lee received orders to join the main fleet for humanity's first counterattack. As the Peaceful Dawn moved toward the rendezvous point, he marveled at what he saw. The human fleet looked nothing like it had a month ago. Ships that had been designed for mining and exploration now moved with military precision. New vessels had been constructed using techniques that combined human engineering with recovered knowledge from their violent past. Everything was sleek, deadly, and somehow familiar, as if these were the ships humans had always been meant to build. Fleet approaching optimal attack position, reported Communications Officer Bo Ram-han from her station. She was new to the crew, a volunteer who had joined when her transport ship was converted to military service, but she coordinated fleet movements like she had been doing it for years. The target was a Vextar command vessel, one of the massive structures that had been directing attacks on human colonies. Intelligence suggested it contained the leadership for an entire battle group. All ships, this is Admiral Hyun-woo, came the fleet-wide broadcast. Today we show the Vextar what they asked for. Today they hear humanity's war song. As the human fleet moved into attack formation, something remarkable happened. Each ship knew exactly where to be and what to do, without detailed orders or complex coordination. The fleet moved like a single organism, deadly and precise. The Vextar vessel was massive, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could deflect anything in humanity's old arsenal. But the weapons approaching it now were based on principles the aliens had never encountered. Target acquired, reported Suman from the Peaceful Dawn's pilot station, beginning attack run. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded history. The human ships didn't just attack the Vextar vessel, they attacked its confidence, its understanding of warfare itself. Every move was unexpected. Every tactic was something the aliens had never seen before. The Vextar fought back with devastating firepower, but their shots seemed to miss targets that should have been easy to hit. Their defensive positions crumbled under attacks that came from directions that shouldn't have been possible. They're not just losing, observed strategist Wu Jin from the command ship. They're losing in ways that are making them question everything they know about warfare. When the Vextar command vessel finally fell, its destruction sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Ships that had seemed invincible suddenly appeared vulnerable. Tactics that had worked for millions of years were failing against an enemy that seemed to rewrite the rules of combat with every engagement. But the most disturbing part, from the Vextar perspective, was that humanity was clearly holding back. The weapons they used, the tactics they employed, everything suggested they were capable of far more destruction than they were actually inflicting. It was as if the humans were not trying to destroy their enemies, but to teach them something, and that possibility was more terrifying than any weapon. The final battle began when Admiral Hyun-woo Park led the combined human fleet toward the Vextar primary war moon, a structure so massive it had its own gravity field. Intelligence reports suggested it contained not just the aliens' military command, but their entire leadership council. "This is it," he announced to the fleet. "Everything we've learned, everything we've remembered, it all comes down to this engagement." Captain Dong-min Lee positioned the Peaceful Dawn with the assault squadron. Around him, ships that had been cargo haulers and mining platforms a month ago moved with the precision of weapons forged for war. But something felt different about this battle. The rage and awakening violence that had driven humanity's transformation was giving way to something else. Dr. Soon-ja Kim, now serving as the fleet's strategic advisor, had been studying the Vextar with new eyes. Her genetic memories hadn't just awakened knowledge of warfare, they had revealed something about the nature of conflict itself. "Admiral, I'm reading something strange from their command vessel," she reported. "The energy signatures, they're not just military. There's something else there. Something desperate." "Explain." "I think they're refugees." The word sent a shock through the command crew. Refugees didn't match the image of the implacable alien warriors who had demanded humanity's war song. General Jin Nam had been coordinating the ground assault teams, but Dr. Soon-ja's words made her pause. Her awakened tactical instincts were telling her something important about the way the Vextar fought. "They're not trying to conquer us," she realized. "Look at their battle patterns. They're testing us, but they're also protecting something." "Protecting what?" asked Admiral Hyun-woo. "Themselves. But not from us. From something else." As the human fleet approached the war moon, the Vextar response was unlike their previous engagements. They fought fiercely, but there was something defensive about their tactics, as if they were buying time rather than seeking victory. Engineer Tae Hyun-oh, monitoring the battle from the Peaceful Dawn, noticed the alien weapons weren't operating at full capacity. "Captain, their power output is limited. Either their technology is failing, or they're deliberately holding back." Minister Yoon-hae Choi, coordinating civilian evacuations from her position on Earth, received an unexpected communication. It was Ambassador Seong-ho Yoon, but he wasn't calling from the diplomatic center. "Minister, I've been contacted by someone from inside the Vextar war moon," he said, his voice tight with amazement. "They want to negotiate." "Now? In the middle of the battle?" "They say they made a mistake. They want to explain why they demanded the war song." The message that came through diplomatic channels was unlike anything the Vextar had sent before. Instead of demands or threats, it contained something that looked almost like an apology. "We are the Vextar, survivors of the great emptiness that devoured our birth galaxy," the message began. "For millions of cycles, we have searched for a species capable of evolution rapid enough to help us survive what is coming." Admiral Hyunwoo ordered a temporary ceasefire to hear the full message. "The darkness that consumed our home spreads across the universe," the Vextar continued. "It is not a weapon or an enemy that can be fought with violence. It is entropy itself, the end of all energy, all life, all possibility. We have been fleeing it for longer than your species has existed." Dr. Soonja Kim's analysis of the alien data revealed the horrible truth. The Vextar had been running from the heat death of their own galaxy, watching as stars went dark and civilizations died not from war or disaster, but from the simple exhaustion of energy itself. "They've been searching for allies," she reported to the Fleet Command. "Every species they've encountered. They've tested for the war song. But it's not about violence. It's about the ability to fight against impossible odds." Captain Dongmin Lee received permission to dock with the Vextar War Moon. What he found inside challenged every assumption humanity had made about their enemies. The Vextar were dying. Their ancient bodies were failing. Their technology was running on energy reserves that wouldn't last much longer. And their entire civilization was carried in ships that were more like life support systems than military vessels. "We thought all species naturally developed the capacity for strategic violence," explained the Vextar leader. "A being so old its form seemed to shift like smoke. It was the only way we knew to test for the adaptive intelligence needed to survive the great emptiness. But our violence is what we rejected," Dongmin said. "We chose peace. Yes, and that choice showed us something we had never seen before. Your species doesn't just adapt through violence, you adapt through transformation. You can become something entirely new when circumstances require it." Scholar Mi Young Seo, studying the historical records the Vextar shared, discovered why humanity's war song was different from other species. While most civilizations developed warfare as a fixed strategy, humans had always been changing, always evolving new approaches to conflict. "They don't want us to fight their war," she explained to the Emergency Council. "They want us to help them imagine a completely different kind of survival." The revelation transformed the battle into something unprecedented, a negotiation conducted through combat, where each exchange of fire was actually a form of communication. Pilot Su Minjung found herself flying formation with Vextar fighters, not as enemies but as students and teachers sharing knowledge. Engineer Tae Hyun Oh worked with alien technicians to combine human and Vextar technology in ways that neither species had thought possible. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Haejin Park's genetic analysis revealed something amazing about the awakening humanity had experienced. "We didn't just remember how to fight," she announced. "We remembered how to evolve." The genetic knowledge that activated wasn't just military, it was our species' entire history of adaptation and change. Admiral Hyun-woo Park, standing in the Vextar command chamber, finally understood what humanity's true war song was. "It's not about winning through violence," he said. "It's about winning through becoming something your enemy needs instead of something they fear." The Vextar leader's shifting form seemed to stabilize, becoming more solid and less ghostly. "Your species can survive the great emptiness because you don't just resist change, you become change itself." What followed was unlike any alliance in galactic history. Human and Vextar engineers worked together to develop technology that could restore energy to dying stars. Scientists from both species created new forms of life that could exist in the cold emptiness between galaxies. Strategists planned not for war, but for a kind of survival that would outlast entropy itself. The war song the Vextar had demanded turned out to be humanity's greatest strength. Not the ability to destroy enemies, but the ability to transform them into family. 5 years later, Captain Dongmin Lee stood on the bridge of a new kind of ship, one built with combined human and Vextar technology. Around him, the crew included members of both species, working together to restore life to worlds that had been dead for millions of years. "Status report," he requested. "The Star Restoration Project is ahead of schedule," reported his Vextar science officer. 12 dead systems have been successfully reignited. Through the viewports, Dongmin could see construction platforms where beings from dozens of species worked together. The Vextar had introduced humanity to other refugee civilizations, all fleeing the advancing darkness between galaxies. But instead of just running, they were now fighting back, not through violence, but through renewal. Admiral Hyen Woo Park, now commanding a truly peaceful fleet, reflected on how much had changed. The Terran Defense Fleet no longer existed to defend against enemies. Instead, it existed to defend against entropy itself, carrying life and energy to the darkest corners of the universe. The war song the aliens had demanded from humanity had turned out to be the song of transformation, the ability to turn any conflict into an opportunity for growth, any enemy into a potential ally, any ending into a new beginning. And in the growing light of restored stars, humanity's greatest victory continued to spread across the galaxy, the victory of making war itself unnecessary by transforming the very nature of what it meant to survive.